CVICTUS is a clean tech company developing clean energy hubs for the energy transition. We can produce low carbon hydrogen and hydrogen carriers like ammonia and methanol at a fraction of the emissions from today's technology and with no green premium, cheaper than today's technology. CVICTUS's patented process of enhanced hydrogen recovery is a Canadian innovation being piloted in Alberta, but suitable for resources around Western Canada and Eastern Canada. With that technology in place and that expertise in place, CVICTUS can take this technology around the world, and Canada can be a leader at taking coal and turning it from a source of CO2 into a sink of CO2, while producing low carbon products for the energy transition. So we drill 2 horizontal wells, and the space between the wells is the panel. If it was a longwall mine, you would drill shafts and you would have a cutter going back and forth between, but instead of that, we use heat and we shuttle the heat back and forth between the wells. Inject oxygen, produce syngas. Inject oxygen, produce syngas. And switch them, and you use the heat of the partial combustion and gasification to consume the coal as you come back. So it actually is a longwall mine down below. It is the same void that a longwall mine would be at the end of the day, which at the end of the day, we fill it with CO2. So we've filled the pillars of the mine, the pillars that hold the roof up, we filled those up with CO2 during operations, and then we fill the panel up with CO2 and develop another panel. And if you want to wrap your head around it, the first panel running at idle, that's our first project. Half a petajoule of energy, produces 7 tons a day of hydrogen. That same panel run at full throttle is 5 petajoules of energy. Goes up to 70 to 80 tons a day of hydrogen. There's no market for 80 tons a day of hydrogen today. And our plants would typically be configured around 3 panels running at the same time. So 80 tons times 3, 240,000 tons of hydrogen is what you could produce if you ever had the market to sell it. Or you take that and you produce 500,000 tons of methanol, which is a hydrogen carrier. Or you take the ammonia off your air separation plant, you take the nitrogen off your air separation plant and you mix it with the hydrogen and you make ammonia. And then on the bigger scale, you take methanol and feed it to microbes, bacteria that get their sole source of energy and carbon out of methanol. They eat alcohol, and they like a little ammonia for dessert for the nitrogen. And those single cell protein are the exact same single cell protein that ICI, Imperial Chemical, produced commercially till 1986 in Billingham, England. That is a proven high quality animal feed, and you're producing it without photosynthesis. And you're producing it without impacts to fresh water, and you're producing it without impacts to land, deforestation, or fishing all the fish out of the ocean. So the true game changer in our technology is to be able to produce energy and to produce animal feed. CVICTUS's clean energy hubs have the ability to produce hydrogen at about 1/3 of today's standard for green hydrogen. When we look at our site and how scalable it is, the actual quantitative amount that we can reduce carbon depends on what size we have, but the small project, commercial project, will produce at about 1/3 of the emissions of green hydrogen. We are lower carbon than gray, lower carbon than blue, and lower carbon than the standard for green hydrogen. And there's no green premium. We're cheaper than them all too. CVICTUS's technology is scalable and can target energy resources around the world. We use deep stranded resources, recover the energy we need, recover the beneficial gases we want to sell, and sequester the carbon back into the same formations. This is a technology that will be first piloted in Canada, but can be used around the world, giving countries like India and China another way to use deep stranded resources without the carbon impact. CVICTUS chose Alberta for our first site for a number of reasons. Alberta had the regulations in place, has the equipment and the technology and the people in place to make our process work. CVICTUS has deep stranded resources that are not suitable for other oil and gas operations, and Alberta really was the place to start this process. Our second project is in Wyoming, very similar to Alberta, but Alberta stood out with the people and the regulations in place to make it happen. That is the Alberta advantage. There are people that truly know how to make things happen, and they leverage what's been done in the past. CVICTUS's vision is to be the most positively impactful and profitable company on the planet. We see our technology being used around the world to provide developing countries with the energy they need to develop and the place they need to sequester the carbon on site. We see stranded resources around the world being used in a different way, a paradigm shift, changing the way we use the resource and the way we sequester carbon. We don't need a government-supplied carbon trunk line. We put the carbon dioxide back into the ground underneath the plant in the same formation. CVICTUS's technology is massively scalable around the world. We can build plants from 7 ton a day to 80 ton a day to multiples of 80 ton a day of hydrogen, as an example. We are scalable, we are globally deployable, and we can be the most positively impacted company on the planet by producing low carbon products for the hydrogen economy.